You know when we're live. There's that hot rod driving by Josh's again. Cool. All right, welcome to a special edition of CoinCast. We'll call this CoinCast episode 11 or chapter 11, which sounds ominous.
Very ominous.
It's going to be a little bit different. I'm not necessarily interviewing Joel or interviewing about Dash specifically, but we're going to talk about the lifestyle of cryptocurrency. One of the things that I have spoken about quite a bit in the crypto traders group is how all value is derived from utility, and the primary utility of cryptocurrency is as cash. Now, I'm not an old school Dash fan. Dash was always one of the coins. It's like I knew it existed. I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. A little bit different. I've come to realize that Dash, through their marketing and just kind of the way they posture themselves, is specifically as digital cash. And so I've found a little bit of kinship here with Joel Valenzuela, who's been kind enough to join me this afternoon, and just basically talking about all the different coins that kind of posture themselves as a cash use case coin. For full disclosure, Joel Valenzuela, you're the chief editor of Dash Force News. Can you explain your relationship to Dash a little bit, just so we keep the haters happy?
This is good. This is it's an interesting thing because due to the nature of everyone who works for Dash's relationship with Dash, that anyone can kind of plug in and basically choose their own job description as long as people are willing to fund that. My title has always been a little bit up in the air. Right now, I call myself the Director of Public Outreach for Dash Force, which is a specifically promotional and outreach type arm. Okay. So that includes, I do run as the chief editor of Dash Force News, which is the #1 source for Dash news anywhere. I mean, it's not like it's a very competitive market at this point, but it is pretty good.
Cool. So the Dash DAO is your employer, or is that fair to say, or no?
Yes. Okay. Basically, how I earn my living is I write a bunch of text that says, I think I can do all this cool stuff that will help Dash. And I submit on the blockchain a proposal that says, we want this much, myself and 2 other partners have this operation going, we want this much money to be able to do it. Will you fund it? And about 4,500 completely anonymous, if they choose so, people from all over the world look at that and vote yes, no, or abstain. And if the yeses are over a net 10%, then it gets beamed right from the blockchain. And during every month there's a super block, as it's called, which is a large block, which includes that extra 10%, which then gets distributed straight to the addresses of proposal owners. And I think it's obviously, if I start doing a bad job at whatever, then that's not going to work out very well for me. But a good thing is it does allow a lot of flexibility where you wouldn't necessarily have a corporate structure. Also, one thing I realized that I have only recently started to realize this is most Treasury coins for one thing, all of them came after Dash, but most of them don't have that mechanism. Most of them have a trusted element to where there's a certain amount that goes to a single address or single location, and you trust the team to then distribute it to the proposal owners. Right. And so I won't name too many names, especially because there's a couple that I just have not thoroughly investigated enough to make sure that, but I would just say if you're into a governance coin that does that as a treasury mechanism, absolutely look into how it happens. And you should be trying to, if you care about the project deeply in decentralization, you should be trying to push them towards a spot where coins get created from nothing and then hit their final recipient.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Are there any projects that have an existing DAO that does that similarly to Dash? Even if they're a total copycat, is anybody doing the same mechanism?
I am not sure. From what here's what I know right now. I know PivX was a Dash copy, and I'm not saying that as an insulting term. It was a Dash copy that then they changed a few extra things, and now it's not quite that Dash-like. They have a treasury. In the beginning, it wasn't working, and since then it is working. I'm pretty sure that since it's a direct Dash copy that they've gotten it to where it actually pays out to addresses, but don't quote me on that. The other two that come to mind would be Decred and Smart Cash, both of which Decred, as far as I'm aware, as far as what I could gather from what the founder was talking about, all the Treasury funds go to a single location, and then they're able to. Obviously, it's voted on, et cetera, but it's not completely trustless. And as far as Smart Cash, there's one single address with over half of the coin supply. So I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that sounds like trouble to me. So, okay, cool. So the nature of this interview, like I wanted to talk about specifically like Cash as a use case for cryptocurrency, like blockchain's killer app being Cash. And then also kind of going over, I've shared your CNN interview and the piece they did on you a couple times now. Well, I say a couple, probably a dozen times in the last month or so, because I get criticized all the time for telling people they should indeed spend their cryptocurrency. Like they have to give it value.
What a world we live in.
To have value. and I get two pushbacks. The major pushbacks are, well, if I don't want to be the pizza guy that, I've spent $100 million on Papa John's in 5 years. Or like the complexity, the tax issues, and all that kind of crap. So I share your video all the time. I'm like, well, here's Joel. He lives entirely on Dash. So is it the case you don't have a bank account yourself?
Yes, I closed in 2016.
Okay,
early 2016. So over 2 years debanked.
That's debanked. I like that. All right.
Yeah, cool. Unbanked makes it seem like it just generic, like you don't have one. So, and there's a lot of issues that you might not have that. So, for example, Tiffany Hayden, who's a big Bitcoin, and I believe Bitcoin Cash and Ripple advocate, has before talked about it being unbanked because of a certain housing situation kept her not having a permanent address, which wouldn't let her have a bank account. But I did it intentionally, and so I want to make that distinction that it's not like, oh, I'm suffering. I'm like this poor person who just, it's like whatever mess I'm in, I did it to myself.
Got it. So what would you say, like, do you have like a day-to-day challenge? Is there something that drives you nuts about that? Like what's your biggest, like maybe not day-to-day, but like if you have a weekly or a monthly thing that's just like, this would actually be quite a bit easier if I had a bank account. Yeah.
There's a couple things. I mean, online payments are really great with crypto. The thing is, it's always, there's a bunch of things that want you to have a card on file, right? So, for example, you have, I remember I used to teach at a martial arts school, and one of the times they'd always, even if they accepted payments in cash, I know a few of them would require you to have a card on file in case you kind of didn't pay to the backup thing, and they just were unflinching on that. So there would be, I mean, but the thing is, martial arts schools are extremely easy to negotiate with on that, and I mean, some of them are very crypto friendly. In fact, Faraz Sahabi of TriStar Gym has paid competitors in Dash, and he's only like a 4 or 5 hour drive from me. I might as well pay him a visit and see if he can take Dash for school. But I'm saying, having card on file, the biggest pain is parking meters, because a lot of them only take cards,
right?
Or a lot of parking things only take cards. A lot of them take coins as well. Those kinds of things where it just says, swipe your card. I did have this one issue. So the Free State Bitcoin Shop, which is a wonderful little store here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, sells prepaid Visa gift cards.
Okay.
And so I bought one of those for my travels outside of my wonderful little zone that I'm in, where I don't have to worry too much.
Right.
And it worked out great, except I remember this one airline that I already bought the ticket and everything with Dash, directly with Dash via Cheap Air, but they did not tell you that in order to have it, that you had no carry-ons allowed, that you had to check bags and you had to pay extra for it. It was a unique situation to where then they wouldn't swipe the card, like the swiping card didn't work, and then you have to literally manually enter it and stuff. There's a few little things like that make it more difficult, but I mean, it's always those kinds of things. The bill payment, where it's like you put your card on file and then they bill you regularly, and that's it. Kind of, I'm sure these things will get sorted with cryptocurrency, but it also really emphasizes a difference between the old and the new financial world. The new financial world is voluntary. No one can take your crypto out of your wallet without your consent unless they're literally robbing you.
Right.
Whereas the old financial thing, you have a line of credit or an account that then people can just decide to take money out of. And it's just anytime you owe money, they just take it out. Like, think about gym memberships. What if everyone had to pay in crypto for gym memberships? Like, how would that model change?
Right.
So that's been the biggest thing, the kind of thing where people are trying to do that thing where they can just siphon money off whenever they want. That kind of model is where it tends to be most difficult with crypto.
Sure. Interesting. It's fascinating. Like I teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the evening, so I'm involved in the exact same situation. I have people pay me in crypto for private lessons, but the gym membership situation itself is, just a standard credit card processor, and the gym owner is like, hey, that's the crypto Kurt or whatever, but he's crazy. So
yeah, well, there are some good payment processors, and I'm sure we'll have to figure that thing out after the thing, but I'm pretty sure that it's not as hard as it might seem, and especially the next time there's another market bull run. Unfortunately, that's how human psyche works. People don't care if it's not going up. So yeah, for sure. Well, that was my next kind of like my concern. Like when I think about now, I own, or I'm one of the partners of Crypto Traders Pro. We are a crypto centric. Like we only accept cryptocurrency for payment. We pay our vendors, we pay our employees. It's all crypto. So that's all. Like I get that, but I have to convert for my mortgage and that kind of stuff. So there's a certain amount of crypto that I have to convert to USD to pay my bills, that kind of thing. When Dash was $1,500 or whatever in January. Are you looking to like stock up on bulk like things you need for the year when you see that kind of thing, or do you just kind of ignore you can't ignore the purchasing power of a single Dash like when it's way up, or how do you manage that? Yeah, the fluctuations. Well, first off, if you take the crypto lifestyle as a whole, it's a lot easier. So, for example, at its very bottom, I can't remember if Dash went below 200 this year. It might have gone like 190 or something. I don't remember.
I think I saw a 189. I remember talking about it at some point.
Yeah. So when I first started earning Dash was late 2016, and it was about $7-8 a Dash.
Sure.
So at its worst, it's massively up from that.
Right.
And what that means, and obviously we get paid every month, and it's not in a fixed Dash amount, because if it wasn't a fixed Dash amount, I'd be retired 28 million times over by now. But it's not, so you can't just peg it to fixed Dash amount only when the times are bad. So basically what ends up happening is whenever there's a big surge, I tend to spend it on more discretionary type things. For example, I prepay for a trip that I have to do, or I got the new dining room table that we need because the one we have is terrible and free off Craigslist or whatever. And just do those kinds of things, and then just live lean on the way down. And I believe Jeffrey Tucker wrote an article about how cheap crypto people are, how it's like emphasized like savings, that people will downgrade from a 2-bedroom to a 1-bedroom because they understand that their money is going to be worth more in the future. They're actually saving for the future under a scheme of a money that doesn't constantly lose value. Right. And so it is a lot of crypto type people, and a lot of people say like, oh, you must be rich because you started making Bitcoin 2013 and then exclude like. Yeah, but mostly I was making like $12,000 a year for like the last few years, excluding last year. I mean, I'm not even kidding. That might even be an inflated figure. I mean, it was just living close to the bone, and that experience, even when when you have like a human being salary as opposed to what they might pay a donkey, and I mean seriously, then those habits, those skills should be retained, because then you can just sort of hold tight. It's almost like going on a fast. You just sort of hold tight and wait until the time's right, and then things go better, and then you buy a few things and you hold tight again. But that's also just a very good generic human life skill. To live with less and then have much more discretion as to the largesse when you want to employ it. I mean, one thing's for sure is one of the reasons why there's such a bad financial system, one of the reasons why cryptocurrency even exists is because of this debt and spending based world where it just, they push you to no money down, sign up on this thing, sign up on that thing, until now you have a constant stream of bills.
Right.
And so you're spending money like an extremely affluent person, but you're not getting anything for it.
Right.
And so it's kind of that reversal of that. I mean, the whole mindset really, I think, helps people be a lot happier and more stable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because, like, you know, just this conversation, I mean, this is like Dave Ramsey, you know, like don't spend so much, like put your goals on the fridge and that kind of thing, you know. And like, I know people that go through classes to you know, learn from somebody who read Dave Ramsey's book to explain, like, man, how do I get out of debt? I'm, you know, 25 years old and I've got 80 grand in, you know, cars and clothes and credit card debt, all this crap, you know. And it's like, I've always been super frugal, but you're right in that the dollar system, the credit system, like, it encourages you to spend. Like, the dollar in your pocket is losing money constantly, or it's losing purchasing power. Whereas, like, yeah, sure, for the last 6 months, crypto has lost some purchasing power. But, you know, if you look at the grand scheme, like, it's typically deflationary or very lightly inflationary and accrues value, scarcity, all of that stuff. And I think people don't seem to understand, like, you know, that it's not like you lost, like the guy that bought the Papa John's pizza, like that wasn't his only, whatever it was, 19,000 Bitcoin or whatever the hell he spent on the pizza. But
yeah, I mean, in that, when I've been in his case, it kind of was where it was like, all right, I spent like the last of my Bitcoin on food, and then now I'm waiting until I get paid again, and hopefully it comes. Like, I've been in that situation before, but that's an invaluable life lesson. And that's the thing is people go away with it. People have gotten way too into the speculative value of cryptocurrency.
Right.
And I think that the two worlds of speculation and of practical use are very much intertwined. I think that a lot of people tend to jump on one or the other camps. Everyone cares about speculation, and a few people don't want to care about speculation.
Right.
But speculation is tied to the value, the true value, and true value can be created by speculations. For example, when you have when you're just a lowly crypto developer and you just have your little whole sack of Bitcoins or whatever, and then the price goes crazy, then all of a sudden it's profitable to run companies that build out the infrastructure around something like this. All of a sudden you can start hiring more developers. All of a sudden you can push the actual technology forward. You can give it away to people as bonuses and incentives to take it for merchants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
So these things are definitely intertwined.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the thing is, like, you know, I get people, like, I'm on two sides of this fence. Like, I got into cryptocurrency because I was like an anarchist activist type. And like, but then I got into trading because I'm also a businessman, and I see that opportunity and I say, like, well, you know, price speculation does help set the value. Like, if you look at all other markets, the liquidity that's created by traders is one of the things that helps us put a spot value on currency in the first place. Like, you know, Bitcoin doesn't have any value if nobody's willing to trade it for anything. And so trading it does give it that. But I get the haters from, like, you know, the old anarchist groups are like, you're one of these people shorting Bitcoin and blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, then the trader side, like, the traders all look at me like, you're spending your cryptocurrency, you idiot. And like, you know, I'm just like, you guys are both wrong. And like, your attitudes are both wrong, but you're both actually right with your, you know, the value.
Just one thing that got me about just speculators who think that you should never spend your cryptocurrency is, well, if no one does that, then your speculative value goes away.
Right.
You have nothing to speculate on. So it's one of those things of, it's like a game of hot potato. Who's the last one caught like spending the Bitcoin?
Right.
Because everyone else tries to like, they try to con other people into doing it so they get rich. It is a little bit pyramid scheming and that kind of attitude. And I don't really believe in that. And also, their speculation and real use are two different sources of value. And I don't just mean well, you can care about this or you can care about the other. They're two different sources of increasing your bottom line. On the one hand, you can buy stuff and then it just goes up in value over time because people think it's going to be used. Sure. On the other hand, you can use it to save money. For example, there's a belt maker in Venezuela, which Venezuela has, I think, approaching 600 merchants that take Dash right now. It's pretty crazy. One of these guys, he buys his materials from China. He pays Dash for his materials, and then he sells them for Dash to customers in Honduras. And so that's, I mean, it's two continents, but it's three countries, three different currencies, some of which are extremely volatile. Right. And it's the same as if he was transacting all with three people in the same room, in the same country, language, everything. Right. And so I'm sure he's saving a lot of money regardless of the fluctuations in price. I think just by using that. And think about all the Bitcoin businesses. And of course, this goes back to the good old Bitcoin Cash nostalgia type thing. I remember when Bitcoin used to work and all that kind of stuff. But there was a time when there was a giant boom in, first it was, obviously I'm a friend of Roger Ver, so I'm going to say nice things about him. But as like the first Bitcoin investor in all these companies, there's like so many of these Roger Ver tied companies, like Purse, like BitPay, et cetera, that just managed to create a lot of value out of the use of this technology rather than just speculating on, or what happens sometimes these days is servicing the cryptocurrency industry. Right. So there is a lot of ways you can make value. And the more you see value being made like that, then that's a good sign to speculate on it. Right. And then you speculate on, then that goes up, and then it's a intricately tied relationship. It is. I mean, it's a free market. Like that's the beauty of free markets. There is that, you know what, somebody creates value. I mean, look, Satoshi Nakamoto created value out of electricity. Like he's like, hey, we can use electricity to create a ledger of account that provides value for all essentially wasted electricity. Like I have a buddy who's an electrical engineer, and I was talking to him about mining because I said like, hey, a lot of people say that, mining it's bad for the environment, and therefore, proof of work it has to go away. We have to, concede proof of stake coins are the future because, blah, blah, blah. And I was talking to my buddy about it, and he's like, no, absolutely not. Like we create so much excess electricity that mining creates, and I'm not an electrical engineer, but he was saying that the mining operations, the bigger the better, because they create, they condition the network. Like electricity that comes back to the power plant is problematic. They have to create systems that deal with electricity coming back in. So using it to mine currency, is huge. It's funny about that, how like electric cars have sort of intersected with those downtimes to where you can charge your car overnight. But also BlockCypher, which is a web services company that has a strategic partnership with Dash, they also partnered with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory for the U.S. Department of Energy to do a pilot program where there's a few households in Arizona right now that are buying and selling their electricity. There's excess electricity for Dash. Sure. Through a U.S. government program, which is very bizarre to be like, how's that all intersecting? But that's exactly what you could do. You got some smart meters, and you just sell, like what happens if there's a giant Dash mining farm, like up the way or in another country, doesn't matter, it's on the grid somewhere. And you have excess electricity, and then they're literally making Dash, and then they just pay you with some Dash for more electricity to make it, and then it all cancels out. And also, I live up in the frozen tundras of New Hampshire, and it's 80 plus degrees today, but sometimes it gets cold. Yeah. And a lot of people heat their houses with miners in the winter. And so that's like a seasonal mining kind of thing where you can, depending on the season, and then the top of Mount Washington is, of course, always freezing. So if you manage to run a mining farm up there, you could just live up there. And so there's always these kinds of efficiencies that people don't realize that you can kind of get. And I think people also discount the sheer costs of running a fiat currency system. Right. Not to mention, all the paper, all the minting of coins, the mining, the literal physical mining of coins, all the electricity and everything to run the banking system. That's pretty titanic, and just how little infrastructure is required for a global payment system like Dash or say Bitcoin Cash, something to run a really robust thing on
right
on chain. That's nothing compared to current, like just even like one bank.
Right. Yeah. No, it's absurd, and that's the argument that I have to have with people. But so I think creating this kind of efficiency with proof of stake. I always talk about the security concerns, but that's me being me. Yeah, and when you look at the nodes, look at Neo, for example, it runs on 7 computers. It's like, guys, this is an intranet, and like requires essentially no programming, no infrastructure. So what's the actual investment? Like, that's pure speculative value, in my opinion. But people tell me I'm crazy. So
that's the thing that I always proof of stake is probably overhyped for how far it's come at this point. The basic value proposition of proof of work is people doing work to run the network. Therefore, hash rate secures the network. Mm-hmm. And just having the idea of previous funds secure the network kind of takes away from the whole decentralization idea of anyone can run the network, in terms of, anyone can, as long as they buy something from someone who already has it. And then it kind of like, cryptocurrency is not the most efficient payment system in the world necessarily. Its strength is in its decentralization. So if you make it so it's not really a decentralized system, it's kind of pointless a little bit. Just go for like a PayPal.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, a couple of questions on like living on cryptocurrency. Do you rent, or do you own a home, or what's your living situation?
Yeah, so I rent right now.
Okay.
Whereas owning a home is where you always have to pay the government, and only a few places does the government take crypto payments.
Yeah, for sure. So does your landlord accept Dash? Does that?
So right now, no, and that was a change, right? There are, if you look at properties around New Hampshire, there are quite a few that accept rent in cryptocurrency. In fact, like Ledgeview Commercial has like a dozen or so units. Thing is, like, I didn't like any of theirs, so so since I live with my girlfriend, she's into Dash but doesn't make any. We kind of have an arrangement there, but I'm pretty sure I could convince my landlord to take it, and it would be relatively doable. But I haven't gotten off my ass to do it. That's kind of that, and so that's like the big expense thing that you kind of have to do through a peer-to-peer way. Although I'm sure this will come up a whole lot more, but that's really what people seem to forget is people talk about a peer-to-peer digital currency.
Right.
And then they start asking you how you can use it with third parties. And it's while that is kind of the sign of efficiency, and like when we've reached mass adoption where you don't have to form a peer-to-peer relationship, that's really how you use it. It's like, well, how does anyone take something? Well, you talk to a guy, talk to a girl, and then if they take it, then they take it. And then there you go. Can you trade it for a good or service? And even, for example, if you're like, hey, I want to buy a car, can you buy it for me and then trade it over to me and I'll pay you in crypto? Maybe you can't, maybe the car itself you didn't pay crypto for it, but you paid for the service of having it. And it's still like, well, a car buying service. Well,
sure.
Just like you pay a bank to get a loan for it, et cetera.
Well, it's the same. I mean, even like Purse and stuff. People, I use Purse.io all the time, and it's the same thing. I'm just paying somebody else to buy something for me on Amazon. So, and I don't think that's an unfair. Like, I've had people say, that's not really using cryptocurrency, and it's like, well, it is for me. So, it's interesting. You live in Portsmouth, right?
Yes, in the surrounding area.
Okay, so Portsmouth, I think, is the most heavily crypto city in the country. Anyways,
it's the per capita. It's probably the most concentrated one on the planet. I mean, it's about one Dash accepting business per about 800 people, so that's not too bad.
Yeah.
Caracas, Venezuela has about 400 businesses in the city. For about 2 million people. So that's way more, but that's not, as far as the ratio, it's not quite the same.
Sure. So do you remember, have you been in Portsmouth long enough for it to have been to witness the transition? Like, do you remember when the first business accepted crypto and then like that kind of growth? Like, what did that look like if you experienced it?
Yes. So I do remember a time when there was basically nothing. as far as I know. I wasn't living right here. I was living in the state when there was nothing accepting crypto in Portsmouth. And then a few, liberty-minded people, and of course, hardcore libertarian community will accept crypto, period. It just it's almost like you almost get to tell them that they have to, because they already believe in alternative things. And so they started a co-working space, a co-working event space that I became a member of. And then I was actually teaching some martial art classes out of there as well. And I just did all that with crypto. That was like mid 2014. And there really wasn't very much until somewhere around, I think last year, I can't remember if it's been last year or a year ago, there was one fancy restaurant that started taking Bitcoin through the manager. One of the managers installed a Jax wallet on his phone. It was just doing that. I think what he was doing is he was just paying everyone's invoice and taking it. And then that ended up being, they got set up with BitPay briefly, I think. And then that was just when everything started to be terrible for accepting cryptocurrencies. And then now they use it was a couple folks who run the Free State Bitcoin shop, who they just say, longtime crypto users. One of them used to be a Ripple developer way back in the day and took his entire salary in Ripple and got squillions out of it, I guess. And then so they started a crypto-only shop in downtown Portsmouth. And they kind of use that as a home base to launch attacks and launch incursions into the market. And so there was no good crypto point of sale system, so they made their own. It was called AnyPay. If you look at AnyPay.global, it takes Dash, Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Dogecoin, Zcash, and I don't know if they're working on Bitcoin Lightning, but that's always a little iffy at this point in the technological development stage. But so they created their own point of sale system and just started setting up merchants all over town, and that's been mostly them. And so I've seen like, oh, there's a new one. 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 And then they institute this program, which is funded by the Dash Treasury now. Like after they got a good head start on this, they submitted a Dash proposal to then get some funding to finish the point of sale system, make it a little bit less rustic, and also provide a Dash back. So right now, if you pay with Dash at any of these merchants around Portsmouth, you get like a couple bucks back into your change. I believe it's your change address, but it just happens automatically to where now you got like an incentive to spend. So then, especially with the down times in the markets, now you have people saying, well, I could spend $20 out eating, or I could, spend 15 thanks to Dash back. And then they want to spend their Dash, and then there you go. So I've seen it grow up around, and now it's a spot where it's like really, there's like tons of options. It doesn't quite feel like doing something weird anymore. It doesn't feel like just the one or two spots. Right.
Oh, that's cool. Do you think, and maybe maybe you don't, are these places like, are they paying down the line like their supply chain in crypto too, or do you think they're not receiving enough to do that kind of thing?
I think in the beginning it was very limited, but now that there's more, I do know that there have been some. One of the early acceptors was the Bikram Yoga Studio, and I know that the owner would then be seen around town spending some crypto elsewhere. And I know like the Free State Bitcoin shop hired a few kids from the University of New Hampshire Crypto Club to go run the shop, pay them in crypto, and then I see them around town spending it. And so you do have a little bit of that loop going on. Right now it's not significant enough. However, I do know at that one restaurant that was the first to take Bitcoin, I do know that there are a couple of servers there who are very into crypto. And for example, when the restaurant took Bitcoin but not yet Dash, you could just talk to this one guy and he'd come over and just take your Dash and pay your bill for you. And even though the restaurant does take Dash officially now, he still tries to intercept you to get it for himself. So I'm sure that there's some who would take in crypto. I've been to a few different spots. Every once in a while, there's a server who has a wallet who will accept tips directly in cryptocurrency, which that was a fun little problem because I'm so used to my little Dash bubble where just I have a Dash wallet, it works, I pay for stuff, it works. And then there was one server who only accepted Bitcoin Cash. And I mean, I'm probably because a Bitcoin Cash fan came in and set her up. And so I was trying to tip her. I didn't have any Bitcoin Cash, but I did have some Zcash that I was like, I'm just going to shapeshift this to Bitcoin Cash so I can pay her.
Sure.
And I ended up failing because between all the different wallets, the address formats with Bitcoin Cash were different, and Shapeshift was different, and then it just none of it would work at the end of it. And it turns out I had the mistake of having the Jax wallet, which just so happened to have Zcash sends not working at all.
Yeah, so, I saw you posting that. I can't remember if it was Twitter or somewhere you were posting about like it was like the worst experience ever. Yes,
and it's one of those like transitional thing, which I'm sure will come up later at a later discussion point about when people talk about adoption, like how many layers of there have to be. But yeah, there are a bunch of people around town who will take crypto directly, and a lot of us offer for new people, if we'll set them up with a wallet, we'll double tip them. We'll give them a cash and a crypto tip.
Yeah.
And so, it's the ecosystem's starting to kind of work around. I know there's a few Dash Masternode owners who live in New Hampshire, and then because they get recurring income in Dash all the time.
Yeah.
And then they have to spend fiat on a lot of their bills. They're looking for spots to spend Dash, and so then they go and like, hey, let's eat out and like only a Dash spot because you know.
I mean, it's cool. I mean, it's the dream. You know, I live outside of Chicago. I don't really have like a local, like there's a few places around that do, you know, but I don't necessarily want to eat there or shop there, that kind of thing. And then I patronize because I'm that crypto guy, and just like, I don't know. I don't want it to be like a weird cult that way either. But it's just interesting to see. I've never been to New Hampshire. I want to make the trip. I keep saying every year I'm going to go to Pork Fest and all this stuff, and I'm just like always too busy. But
yeah, we'll make it happen. There's the Free Coast Fest coming up in early September, so we'll check that out. I mean, Dash is the prime sponsor of them too. So
cool. What do you think? And this might be too personal a question, but how do you deal with taxes? Is that
so? I'm going to answer more in a generic context, because I think that'll be a little bit more helpful to people. How people deal with taxes tends to be. With crypto, it's a little bit weird because of the categorization problems. There isn't something very specific with that. It's just the same as, like, for example, if you had a cash-only business, then you somehow have to get that. And I have not seen anyone deal with a tax agency to where you show up with a bushel of bills and just, here you go. Like, I'm pretty sure that you have to at some point convert the cash to something. So I assume that most people treat crypto as cash in that regard. And I know a few businesses do. And in fact, a few, every time they accept cryptocurrency, they just the owner buys the crypto from the business pretty much on the spot, just to make the taxes easier. Some write it off as a marketing expense. All the crypto doesn't even exist. Kind of, it's like a marketing promo thing. There's a few different things with that. Basically with crypto in the US, as far as I'm aware, it's treated as a commodity, and you owe capital gains if it goes up. And so that's always like a generic type thing with any kind of asset. It's easier in places like, for example, in Austria, if you have cryptocurrency and you hold on to it for over a year, then no capital gains. So then that makes it a lot easier. Now, as far as like the minutiae of dealing with taxes, as far as I'm able to tell, and of course I'm the furthest thing from a tax attorney, but as far as I'm able to tell, it seems like usually you just have to deal with capital gains if you buy a bunch of stuff. And it tends to be, as long as you can kind of back that up, it's fine. Now, as far as businesses operating day to day, if you're a cash business, you already have that kind of odd red tape. You just treat it like a cash thing could work. But if you're a business that has to deal with extreme regulations, for example, there's the legal cannabis industry is walking on eggshells, and there's this payment processor and integrated merchant solution, including B2B, that's Dash exclusive, called Alt36, that specifically targeted at the legal cannabis industry. And of course, they have to go through tons of red tape and stuff to make that work, including money transmitter licenses in all the states, et cetera. But that platform does make all the tax calculations in the software itself for if you accept Dash for payment, whenever you cash out, it just does it all for you. So it's just easy. And I do know there are some companies. So for example, Node 40 is a company that allows you to track your cryptocurrency profit and loss for tax purposes, including basically, you export your list of addresses, et cetera, to them, and then they just go through it and find like, when did you buy, when did you sell it, and then it makes it pretty easy. So there are a few services that make that level of minutiae pretty easy, but that's always been one of the more challenging things in the United States, in particular, is just how complicated the tax situation is for anyone.
It sucks.
That for the most part, you kind of just make it up a little bit. This is just my observations. I've seen people just say, I made this much, I owe, okay, this is how much I owe, this is how much you're getting, and then they kind of like either buy it or don't, and if they don't, you're in trouble. But it's like, sometimes it's like, I think this is probably what I owe, fingers crossed. Oh, they took it, okay.
Right.
And so that's kind of like how that works. So that's basically the thing. I like reminding people about the crypto mindset, that people seem to think that crypto is this different thing as far as taxes are concerned, that nothing in the world is a unique problem, when absolutely is not. This is just how you have to deal with what happens if someone gifts you a horse in exchange for stuff. I mean, seriously, like I got my orthodontic work done in the north of Mexico, and it was paid for exclusively in cattle, because my dad's a cattle rancher, and the dentist is he has a ranch as like a hobby, and so it's like, hey, I'll give you, and just pay a couple cows and there you go. And so how do you write that off on tax? I mean, I'm sure you can do it like an approximate valuation type thing, and something that they'll buy, but it's not like there's like something written like, depending on the weight and the health of the animal, this exact rate, and derive the curve and all that. Like, no. It's just kind of, you have to figure it out.
No, for sure. Well, and it's the same thing. You hear these, crazy stories like that too. People paying in pennies or people bartering. Like, if you look at the IRS paperwork, because one of my favorite things, like you really want to figure out like how cruel the government can be, is like read through all of the exceptions that you have to paying your taxes. Like they specify if the United States is in the middle of like an occupation, or if the U.S. has been bombed, like nuclear fallout, everything, like you still owe your taxes, period. And like, it's so draconian that it's like people, they want you to panic and then therefore just overpay for the sake of like just, being safe or whatever. But
yeah. And then may or may not get a refund. And then sometimes they're like, they yell at you for not getting stuff right, and when you get it right, then they give you money, and it's almost like a Monty Python sketch. Sometimes it's just like bizarre. But that's the thing that I do believe governments should, and obviously everyone knows my point of view in being like a little government is possible up to and including no government. Right. But as long as we're talking about, I think governments can profit from cryptocurrency in that they can vastly simplify the taxation systems, so that then everything becomes very, very open and transparent. You could just say, I mean, can you imagine just writing like a smart contract into whatever platform, whatever wallet, software, or business platform you use, or something that just automatically, it's auditable by coders around the world and just automatically just pays your taxes. Like, can you imagine a world where you don't have to file taxes because it's just all taken care of throughout the year?
Right.
And it just is automatic. Like, how much more efficient would businesses be? How much more profitable and efficient would businesses be? And how much less would the government have to spend on figuring out what they're trying to take from people and taking it from people?
Right.
And so there's a bunch of, I mean, I really think that the government should just, as far, even from their perspective, which, I mean, I don't think government should do anything, but as long as they're doing stuff, it would be in their best interest to let cryptocurrency flourish as much as possible.
Right.
And, because government's not really a productive sector, and it's productive by piggybacking on the success of the productive sectors. And so this is one of the world's most productive sectors in the future. And so I would definitely just let cryptocurrency fly loose and then figure out how you can leech off of that.
Right.
Sorry, I had
for sure.
that dig at the end.
No, man, dig away.
Yeah.
Like that's I'm here for soft revolution. Like I'm a big believer in revolution by optimization or efficiency. Like I always make the case when I talk to people about like the Catholic Church. If you look back, like let's go back 600 years, the Catholic Church could physically punish you for not tithing, or they could physically punish you for your lack of participation until we got the printing press, the Protestant Revolution, everything else kind of pushed out, made people aware that like, hey, like we can be more sovereign than the Catholic Church wants us to be, and both sides benefited. Like we as people benefit because we're more free, but the Catholic Church didn't go away. Like I wouldn't say the Catholic Church has suffered over the last 500 years for loss of total autonomy. People have a voluntary relationship with the Catholic Church today. You can go to their church, you can go to a Protestant church, you can go to no church, and we're all better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this kind of, and I someone's going to get angry at me for lumping in the Dash core team with like government. However, just for the apples to apples comparison, this is trying to give government more credit than they possibly do, but still trying to give them credit. For a while, like the Dash core team was the one professional team operating under the Dash ecosystem. There was a bunch of other, basically, but it was amateur hour. It was the professionals. And over time, there's been a few groups who've cropped up and started to do the things that someone in the Dash core team was trying to do, but not really doing that well. And it's largely every single time that there's been, and I'm sure this is a good credit to the attitude towards decentralization of Dash core team, but when there's someone else who starts doing something, I get this feeling of relief of just like, oh, good, we don't have to worry about doing that. Someone else is taking care of that. And as much as government is a lot more control freaky than that, I do sense to a certain extent there's a little bit of a relief when they don't want to be doing everything. They might want to control everything, but just that then people want you to do stuff like the post office. Like the day the post office gets gotten rid of, I think a lot of people in government who are not postal employees, of course, will breathe a huge sigh of relief. We're like, we don't have to run that dinosaur anymore. We don't have to.
Right.
And then I do think that, there was a time before the IRS existed, right?
Sure.
And so somehow taxes got paid, and I think that if there's a way, obviously the IRS is going to fight tooth and nail for survival, but if there's a way to get rid of the IRS, it's like, hey, we just made the collection smart contract. It's just fine. And then whenever there's a change in legislation that changes taxes, it automatically updates the smart contract with the new parameters and stuff. Yeah. And then it's just, they don't have to, you can get rid of the IRS. I don't think the government wants to chase people around for their taxes. I really don't. No. I just think they want it to just arrive. They just want constant recurring income without having to chase after it.
Sure.
And so I do think that as this kind of stuff evolves, I do think that government's going to enjoy having to do less and less. In fact, even to a certain extent, like police force type stuff. Sure. This is just my personal opinion that if other groups and services start dealing with regular policing on a consistent basis, I think that government's going to being able to just use police as court enforcers, rather than, there's the neighbors are arguing, and then it's this lady's fifth time screaming she's going to divorce and move out, and then the cop has to come in there and just listen to him and be like, no, you can't do that. Listen, the neighbors are complaining. I know she's a total bleep, 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 but come on. just all that stuff. Do you really think the government wants to be dealing with that? I don't think so. And so, obviously, I think government's surrendering responsibility voluntarily and happily, or even involuntarily, but happily once it happens, will be a consistent theme. And I also think that with that, we'll get a surrendering of power at the same time that will not be so happy, but will be kind of tied into that, and will be a little bit less easy to spot and kind of stop. So I'm very positive about the societal evolution, and government is not a living, breathing thing. It's a collection of people. And I think that the people will always have some way of fitting into whatever the structure is after that. I mean, for example, you have, like right now, you have plenty of people who are involved in wars overseas who then come back and plug into the police force, for example. Or in other things, you have some people who then decide to start taking up martial arts or security jobs or things like that that are a little bit less destructive, possibly. But it's not like, they just want to, like, they're part of the government Borg that just wants to control everything. It's like there's a lot of human beings involved, and so if the government one day disappeared, I don't think the government would notice, because the government's not a sentient being. It's an inanimate object, and the people involved in government would probably be doing fine.
Yeah, no, I agree. We're getting a bunch of questions in about some. I wanted to talk a little bit about, like, maybe not conspiracy theory might be the wrong term for it, but like Bitcoin Core, like the Blockstream control conspiracy. Like, it sounds like me and you have been involved in Bitcoin since around 2013. Were you a 2013 guy too?
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I like to use Bitcoin as cash, and then it started to be a problem. 2015, I think, is when I remember the debate starting in my universe, like the Bitcoin Unlimited conversations and that kind of thing. Do you think there is a, let's see, what's the best way to phrase this? Is there a legitimate use case for, like, small block, slow, expensive transaction Bitcoin? Like, do you think they're, like, the computer science guys, like, let's say we're talking, Luke Dash Jr. or Samson Mao, like, are these guys, like, legitimately looking for use cases for people, or do you think it is like a profit scheme? Like, is Blockstream trying to just make themselves wealthy, or do they care about decentralization the way they say they do?
Yeah, let me specifically target on that, because there's a couple different entities which get lumped into the same group because of the crossover there of small block Bitcoiners and Blockstream.
Right.
Blockstream is clearly a company, and it clearly has a product, and that product clearly brings them profit, i.e. pays back the investors.
Right.
So they clearly have and people use the word agenda like a dirty. I'm going to find a different word. They clearly have a purpose towards furthering their product and developing their product. And so obviously Blockstream's trying to create the liquid network to work to the best of their ability so other people can use it and it gets them money. And they also, the sinister part, I guess, is that they have a vested interest in making sure that there is a market for their product.
Right.
And so definitely a corporation controlling, paying some developers or paying people who control discussion forums, et cetera, that's definitely a conflict of interest, to where it's clearly the corporation wants to do its thing. And if you're pushing people or saying that, no, everyone needs an off-chain payment channel thing, which, by the way, is what we're selling. Come on. I mean, this isn't conspiracy stuff. This is like, as soon as you learn Santa Claus isn't real, you should be figuring this stuff out. Like, it's pretty obvious. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone who agrees with them on technical issues and stuff necessarily buys into the thing, because Blockstream can't hire everyone. Right. And they don't have a mind control device that I know of, but if they do, I want it. So the thing is, I believe that Bitcoin maximalists, small blocker types have different priorities. Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin originalist type people want to use Bitcoin to spend, want everyone being able to send and receive on chain, just like it worked in the beginning,
right,
as easily and all over the world as possible. And it appears that the small block idea is that, I mean, first off, there's this technical disagreement of, we think that Lightning Network can be just as decentralized, just as good, et cetera, except it can be so much more efficient and so much cheaper, and that Bitcoin at some point, it will not scale large enough on-chain to provide the same experience. And then it's like a technical disagreement on the Bitcoin Cash, Dash, whatever else side of, no, we believe that we can scale this thing as big as it can take on chain and still have the same decentralization, the same experience, et cetera. And I don't mind that technical disagreement one bit, because there's only one way to find out, and then maybe both work, and you just have a philosophical thing of like, well, which thing are you going to use? And I personally believe that if you're selling a product that requires on-chain and off-chain, and the same experience is derived from something that's just one layer, people are going to go for the one layer. If that ends up being, well, that's a disagreement that is solved by facts, right? And the disagreement that's not solved by facts is philosophy. And there's a lot of ideas that go, like a lot of Bitcoin Cash people, and I should, I'll probably annoy a lot of people by saying it like this, but both Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin people are part of the same greater cult of Bitcoin, which I don't mean cult as I'm trying to be as mean as I'm saying. I'm simplifying. But is in the same thing of Bitcoin, the original cryptocurrency, is what people should use for reasons other than it's technical or decentralization related. Is in we want the Bitcoin brand, we want to call Bitcoin, we want it to be original. Like we personally value it being Bitcoin rather than being called. It's like, what if Dogecoin won out? That would be weird, but I wouldn't mind as long as it worked as decentralized as whatever. A lot of people would mind that it was not Bitcoin. So in that camp, you have people who value Bitcoin Cash type people tend to not care if anyone can run a node or a miner or whatever else. People they don't tend to care that everyone can take part in running it. They want everyone to take part in directly using it on chain. Now it seems like the other side, once they don't necessarily care that everyone can use it on chain efficiently, but they do care that everyone has a part in running the greater ecosystem. And there is a lot of value, and it's gotten a little bit weird with some of the religious overtones of it, but I have seen some comments of saying like a Bitcoin node from 2013 would sync with Bitcoin today. I don't care. I really don't care, but some people do. That's what they care about, is that they can participate in this whole thing. And there's a bunch, as we've looked at these large block scaling things, these scaling research papers and experiments, etc. We've seen that at a certain point, too many nodes causes a network to fall apart. That you want there's a certain limit to, there's a law of diminishing returns. At one point, extra nodes become less good, and then at some point you actually start losing integrity of the network through too many nodes. And so I think that could cause it to, be a problem. Although if Bitcoin stays one megabyte, then you could potentially have maybe everyone who wants to can just easily run a node and not even spend any more on a better computer or whatever. And then because the actual on-chain transactions don't work. I don't really care about that, because at some point the network will have to scale. And Lightning is not magic. Lightning is a second network on top of the original network, and that still has to scale. That still has to have large hubs and connectivity. And of course, there's a whole debate: is that going to work, or is it going to be centralized, or routing problems, all that kind of stuff. Leaving that first side for the moment, you still will have to have a large, significant infrastructure that not everyone will be able to efficiently participate in making it work. And then you can't be like, well, everyone can run a Bitcoin node and a Lightning. Like that at that point, that will kind of break down. But the general philosophical difference tends to be between people who feel special by just sending Bitcoin and paying for goods and services in Bitcoin, and the people who feel special through participating in the network in some way. It's more of like and the value that brings. And here's the thing about the free market, right? You don't get to decide what's valuable or what isn't. All value is belief, as my good friend Chuck Williams used to do it all for Dash always says. So all value is belief. And so if people derive value by just holding on to a piece of Bitcoin, this is like the old stuff, it's still 1 megabyte, and that if it gives them value for that, then it's not on us to say that that's wrong. At the same time, if someone derives value from using it and saving money on sending stuff and not having to do AML KYC on everything, using it like digital cash, the difference with that is there's probably more people who are willing to who are willing to find value in that.
Right.
And I think you'll find a very small group of people that are just like, that value Bitcoin originalism, that value running a full node, and that just value being a part of that, and value also the idea that like the Bitcoin core teams, the biggest and most like well respected, or whatever value of like, oh, we like the code that those people told us to do, as well as there is a little bit of nerdy elitism to it of it's inelegant to build bigger systems.
Right.
They want to build some complex, crazy thing, some cheat code network like we're just smarter than everyone else. We built this complex Lightning spoken hub thingy, and it all works out, and everyone's connected. And and then by magic it scales, and that's very much more intellectually fulfilling for some people. That's like, wow, we found something awesome and cool that no one else gets. It's that kind of exclusive intellectualism type thing as well.
The people who disagree are somehow inferior, like that they don't understand the grandiosity of Lightning and all of that.
But it is like there's nerdy clubs everywhere, and there's jiu-jitsu nerds who are just like, dude, I did the omoplata and this weird thing. Like I once how many matches with an Ezekiel choke that no one even knows how to pull off. It's like there's so much nerdiness in every single car nerds about like I own like a 1993 Z car that was like the only one of the kind that had the turbo this and that. Everyone's gonna, and that provides value for those people. The thing is, people when you're talking about scale, about the vast majority of the human race is going to find value through saving units of money and acquiring more of their own, which is what a big block solution works. That's the thing that I think a lot of Bitcoin Cash people seem to forget, is that they're kind of in the nerdy part as well, in that they're much closer to the real world because they actually want something to be useful. But no one who wants that cares what it's called, cares that it's called Bitcoin, or cares if it used to be, cares about the white paper, cares about any of that kind of stuff. They just care if it works. And obviously major payment systems like PayPal and stuff do work to a certain extent. Something that works better and centralized would work for 90% of the world, or 70. But then the other 30% needs something decentralized and censorship resistant for possibly non-ideological reasons. Otherwise they just can't do it. They're not allowed to. So yeah, that's just kind of, in my view, the breakdown between the big block, small block thing is they're really after different things. And to a certain extent, I'd like to see the technical arguments distilled to facts, and I'd like the philosophical arguments, if they want to continue, but to also leave room for agree to disagree, that you just want that and pursue it. I want this other thing and I'll pursue that, and we leave each other alone. Don't try to destroy each other.
Yeah, no, and I agree, and that's the thing. Like, I'm not devoid of Bitcoin Core BTC. Like, I'm a Bitcoin Cash fan. Frankly, like when it all happened, I thought we would see something of a flippening, because I thought there was a lot of support. You had the guys, Bitcoin XT and Unlimited and Classic, like they were all jumping in at the same time. Like, these were all these groups of people that have been burned by the core development team, who I thought could, basically take that network effect and say, hey, like, here was this cabal of guys that threw us out simply because we disagreed, and therefore, like, we are Bitcoin, and here's all this stuff. Now, I was wrong, obviously. BTC is the chain that has continued to be the biggest chain, although it's lost a ton of dominance. But, like, I look at I don't know if you've seen TX Highway, like the visualizer that shows the 32 lanes for the Bitcoin Cash chain, with like a car going every 3 seconds or whatever, and then the Bitcoin Core one is just screaming with transactions still, because they've gotten cheaper. But I don't know, like, I think that's the only part of it that I find disheartening, is that, like, I agree that the cash use case is the more obvious use case for a person. When I get somebody to do something with cryptocurrency the first time, if they want to use Bitcoin and they're like, oh, it's, the mempool, it's going to be 30 minutes for me to get my, like, why the hell is this happening? And so I think Bitcoin Cash is way more obvious. Or in fact, I've the first cryptocurrency transaction I gave to my my mother-in-law was a Dash transaction because I wanted to show her how it worked, and that there were things other than Bitcoin, and so that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, instantaneous cheap fees, that kind of thing. Like that's the wow moment, and but still, like, it persists, this kind of Bitcoin maximalism of the noob, especially when it works in the short term. Somebody trying to use the chain right now,
which I think is pretty. It's you either have to be extremely new, like a few weeks, or you have to be a little bit disingenuous or ignorant to keep that. Well, one Satoshi per byte right now, because you go on BitInfo charts and just look at, and then, oh, you mean 3 months ago this was crazy? Oh, you mean all the other ones cost this much? Oh, you mean there's been a lot of times when Ethereum has had double, triple transactions of Bitcoin for much lower fees.
Sure.
And that doesn't, Ethereum is not really a money anyway, so that doesn't necessarily apply, but it still is. It's all out there. And that's I wasn't quite as surprised / disappointed with the way things shook out. I've been a little more disappointed lately, honestly, with the Bitcoin Cash situation for other reasons. But the thing is, there was a long year in my life when Bitcoin didn't work anymore and there was no Bitcoin Cash. And so when we're seeing this upswell of people who decided that they had enough and they're creating a Bitcoin that works, we have to remember, where the hell were they that whole year? What were they doing? What were they spending? Were they just using old Bitcoin? Like, what were they doing with this glorious revolution? Why are they holding on until they could create something that had the Bitcoin label on it? And so I remember, for example, Roger Ver, I don't know currently, but he used to own quite a few Dash Master nodes. And he tweeted something early 2017 about how he sent like 500 grand worth, whatever, for a fraction of a cent. And Bitcoin used to work this well. And then he just kind of never completed that process. He just kind of hung out into, I'm going to wait until there's a new Bitcoin kind of thing. And now it's all in on that. So what I would say is people that, there was a lot of ignorance too. And I don't mean ignorance in like a hate. I'm not trying to use that as an insult, but a lot of like not knowing. Like, I'm ignorant on a lot of stuff. And so there's a lot of people just not knowing that there was other stuff, or just a lot of misplaced value. There are a lot of people who talk a good line about, oh, I want Bitcoin to work so you can send it everywhere and use it everywhere and all this kind of stuff. And then those people aren't practicing what they preach for a full year. And then as soon as they can practice what they preach, largely they don't. And a friend of mine, Vin Armani, who was CTO of Cointext, big Bitcoin Cash guy, a few times he's expressed a little bit of disappointment, disillusionment in the Bitcoin Cash community, in unwillingness to use it, unwillingness to just go out there and do it and stuff. And so there is always that thing of where, and that's one reason I try to avoid camps too much, because camps tend to be artificial. And when you're looking for something sincere, you find them all over the place. And so you find like a sincere person here, a sincere person there. And so the Bitcoin Cash community, to a certain extent, there's been a lot of the people who value saying, oh, I own part of the originalist Bitcoin vision. Who, that's their primary source of value. It's not the actual use. It's being able to say that it can be or is being used. And so it's like, it comes really meta and psychological at that point. But, the proof is in the pudding, right? The proof is in the actual doing of it. And some tools work better than others for those kinds of things. But a lot of cryptocurrencies basically work, except for Litecoin. It's my little smack talking right there. But during December, when Litecoin hit 100,000 or 200,000 transactions, not only did the fee spike to dollar levels at way under half of what Bitcoin did for that level, but a lot of people were unable to even broadcast Litecoin transactions because I believe they didn't have upgraded enough nodes or enough of them or whatever. So, obviously some things don't work, and maybe IOTA needs another decade before you can send again or whatever. I don't know. I'm obviously talking more smack than I should be here, but I'm just saying
that's fine. That's the point.
Things can work. What a lot of people are kind of missing is they're missing following what happens and are trying too hard to predict what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of like speculation, as of course, predicting what happens.
Right.
But it's a lot easier to predict a continuing of a trend rather than a phantom trend that may or may not exist. So that's what I try to keep my eyes open on, is where are people actually using this stuff? Right.
No, for sure. It's funny you mentioned Vin. Like, Vin is one of my favorite people. Like, I don't know him personally, but I've listened to his podcast for a long time. Like, I've kind of casually known who he was. And I think Cointext is brilliant. In fact, if you go to cointext.io, he used my how-to video on the front page, like for their homepage, like how to use Cointext, which I was surprised to see. Yeah, I was like, hey, cool, I'll take the clicks. But I think it's the most brilliant piece of tech, because I've always been that guy to, I'll be at a bar, or I'll be at a barber or whatever. Like, if somebody has provided me a service for which I would tip them somewhere between $5 and $10, I'm always like, hey, like, can I tip you in crypto? And for a long time, it was like, well, sure, how? And it would have to be, well, go to the App Store and download this thing and make sure you back it up, and et cetera.
There's a couple of really cool things about that. And first off, as far as Cointext is concerned, Cointext did recently work with Dash because Vin was testing that out, and it worked. And I just think that they've probably gotten too focused on building out the platform for Bitcoin Cash. They kind of gotten distracted away from that. But there's a service called Dash Text, which works exclusively in Venezuela, which is, I believe, a country where Cointext has not been able to work. And it's created by people who were inspired by Cointext, who just built something on the ground. For, I guess, only 30% of Venezuelans have a smartphone, so it's for the rest of them.
Yeah.
That's always a good thing. There's this, I believe it's cryptotip.org, or it could be cryptotip.com, but it's a printable crypto tip. It's like a sweepable paper wallet.
I've seen that, yeah.
And I believe it was only for Bitcoin Core before, and now it was BTC Tip. Now it's Crypto Tip, and I can't remember if it works for other currencies or only Dash at this point. But it is a paper wallet that then you can sweep and you can give out as tips, etc.
Nice.
But if it isn't redeemed within a certain time period, it goes back to your wallet. So it's not like you just like lose money for people who never use it. And one of my favorite systems right now is this thing called My Dash Wallet, and mydashwallet.org, and it's like a web My Ether wallet type thing. It's like a web interface, a web system for either a Trezor, Ledger, or just its own desktop wallet for Dash that includes instant send and private send and all that stuff, except it also has a tipping function where you can send to a Twitter handle, for example. And so with that, it's like you go to the person, or you can send to an email address, or you can send to a Reddit handle, or you can connect it to your Discord server and then just tip people live in the Discord.
Nice.
And just say, and tip someone this much, and then just sends it. And they have a rain function, which is pretty cool too. It just like randomly throws money at like people who've been active in the chat lately.
That's fun.
And so the cool thing about that is you're able to, like, everyone either has a Twitter handle or has an email address or has a Reddit or whatever else, and you're able to just say, hey, I'll send you $5. What's your Twitter or whatever? And they give you your username. And then you just send it to the username, and then they get a tweet, like I believe it's a Twitter direct message or it's a mention, and they just click the link, and then it opens their wallet.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
The wallet is tied to that. So that's one thing. And of course, hopefully by the end of the year, the Evolution platform's coming out for Dash that'll allow like an easy username type setup for that. So that's going to really revolutionize the way people use crypto. And that and one thing whenever people are saying like, oh, it's so usable, like I do like a crowd work type thing where I'm like, hey, like, hey, do you want me to send you some Dash? Oh, sure. Yeah. What's your Dash address? And then the answer to that is a little it's like XY73.
Right.
It's not quite there. But then if you just say like, what's your Twitter handle? Or if you're like, what's your username for that, it's going to be a lot easier. And I'm surprised it's taken like the better part of a decade for crypto to get anywhere close to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, me too. Like when I first discovered, like the first time I heard about Bitcoin, I think it was like 2012. And I was like, yeah, that's cool, but how's that ever going to get past like nerdy internet people? And then in 2013, I was kind of like, all right, I'll take the jump. I'll see if I can use this for anything. And then I started to buy some Bitcoin with like part of my paycheck or whatever, and then started making purchases online. I'm like, this is cool, but again, like still like, 2013 Bitcoin was still pretty damn dysfunctional, like for making purchases for a typical person. Like, how can I explain to, my grandma how to use Bitcoin? But now, like, I think finally in like 2017, we started to see like some options that look pretty good. And I'm gonna have to check out the My Dash wallet because we want to set up like a tipper bot kind of thing in our Discord group.
Yeah.
And
I can help you get that all set up.
That'd be great. Yeah.
It's a really cool system. Also, My Dash wallet had this special function where you could do create TX spike, and it would send like 5,000 on-chain transactions. And people going crazy with that is what pushed Dash to its recent over 600,000 transaction spike. Just people randomly going like, oh, cool, I'm going to play with this. And then
right. Yeah, I saw the spike. I was looking at stats. Somebody shared something about, I think it was Bitcoin Cash versus Litecoin.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, hey, look, Bitcoin Cash is finally over Litecoin's transaction volume just lately. And then I was just kind of clicking through them, and I clicked the Dash one. It made everything else like disappear on the graph. I was like, holy cow, what happened on Dash? So
yes,
I wasn't
about
sure.
Half of that was me typing in at create text spike just over and over and over again. But anyway, so my Dash wallet is pretty good with that, and I believe they're going to have an iOS and Android app out at some point.
Cool.
And they'll allow you to select your own node for mixing so that you can run your Dash node at home and just do completely trustless anonymous transactions. So that would be nice.
That's cool. Super cool. So, all right, we're like hour and 20 minutes at this point. We should probably wrap up for the sake of everyone else's days because we got Josh producing, who would also like to have a life, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but
of course.
Anybody you want to give a shout out to or anything before we close up?
Let me see. Obviously, shout out to my colleagues at Dash Force for working really hard. Shout out to the Dash Core team for their good, stable upgrade that's able to handle all that transaction volume.
Yeah.
Shout out to Vin Armani for always being out there on Twitter, asking questions, talking about stuff, and just shaking things up. Shout out to Craig Wright for the endless hours of entertainment. And shout out for Charlie Lee for making the most efficient use of making a lot of money on the minimal amount of effort.
Oh, there it was.
Just being funny.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, thanks, Joel, man. I really appreciate you coming on. It's funny because like somebody recommended, like when I had you on, whatever it was, 2-3 months ago, somebody was like, hey, you should have Joel on. He's really cool. And I was like, oh yeah, like I kind of knew who you were, but like you responded back to me like immediately, which first of all, I really appreciated.
Yeah, no problem.
And then second of all, like how much like we've been able to just kind of casually interact over social media and like that kind of thing. I think a lot of people, like the Charlie Lees, for example, kind of get high and mighty and realize they start to have a little bit of power and maybe push the markets around a little bit. And I just wanted to say, like, I think you're a really good example of somebody who, represents a brand or represents a coin to many people, but keeps a cool attitude. So, good on you.
Thanks very much.
For sure. And, thanks again. We'll do another one of these, I'm sure, when the world turns and there's some new controversy we can discuss. It'll
shouldn't be too long.
No, yeah.
Never a dull moment.
Yeah, I haven't looked at Twitter in 2 hours, so we might already be there.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So anyways, thanks everybody. Check us out, cryptotraderspro.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and look around the rest of our social media. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere else. And give Joel a follow too, all over social media, and we'll all be one big happy family. So thanks again, everybody, and bye-bye.
Bye, guys.